opened up a harm reduction, low-income cannabis patient political and harm reduction center to advocate for policy changes and to start cannabis harm reduction groups. Now it's totally blown up out there that cannabis helps with addictive issues, with the opioid crisis, with methamphetamine, etc. But when we opened our center in 2008, it was not the big buzz it is now, and we started out having one group a day for an alternative to the traditional AANA, because they still think that we are using, if we use medical cannabis, to not use. Interesting, huh? So those services just got bigger and bigger and bigger, and we realized we had to do more and more and more. Slowly we started getting priced out of our neighborhood, and also harassed by corporate cannabis, which is parked right next door to us, which was Spark. And so we were going through not only the whole neighborhood's rent raises, but we were also going through the political silencing and sort of trying to mute our voice in the neighborhood as poor people dealing with harm reduction in a way that worked. So then the rent increases happened and happened and happened until we had to move out. And we were able to get a community partnership with what used to be API, which is now the San Francisco Community Health Center. And twice a week, while we don't have our own community center, we're allowed to meet here twice a week for our women's group. And this is our Choices, which is our alternative harm reduction cannabis group. And interestingly enough, this man's opponent is now in our community center, which is Sonia Troust, right? And so it's a very interesting sort of San Francisco story where...
That's where her office is now.
Yes, her organizing headquarters of the YIMBY movement and Sonia Troust took out a low-income harm reduction organization that was known for being pretty progressive and radical. So it was a very interesting twist of events for me. It is true, I was out there one day screaming and yelling and such about, because when I discovered that a pretty conservative candidate had taken my space, I was like, what on earth is going on here? This is the worst San Francisco story ever. And then, are you ready with the camera, Denise? So we can.
It's on right now.
It's on. Oh my gosh. Okay, so now.
A chair here.
Yeah, let's get you a chair. So we really want to hear from you. We really want to hear what you think about preserving harm reduction services in the district. And we did have the governor completely veto compassion. So technically, what you will hear and see here today has been outlawed by the highest ranking Democrat in our state, and it's really sad. And a lot of people across the state are going to be suffering without their compassion programs. But right here in perceivably your district, people are being cut off. So I want to hear a little bit about, in general, give us your spiel on running, and then if you have any thoughts about preserving harm reduction.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you all for inviting me to come and speak with you. I think I've met some of the people in the room. I may have knocked on your doors or met you around the neighborhood. I actually live very close to here. I live on High between Eddy and Ellis. I've lived in the Tenderloin for some time. I used to live up the street on Larkin and Geary. So this is my home, the community that I live in. And it's very important to me that people here are supported, that their health and their well-being is put at the center of any policy decisions that are made. And certainly for me, why I'm running is because this city is one that holds itself out to be the most progressive place in the country or in the world, continues to be one of the wealthiest places in the world. Yet here in Trump's America, we are still failing to provide basic human rights and human dignity to all of our residents. And I think that we can do a lot better than what we're seeing right now to make sure that all of us are doing well, that we have a place to live, that we have access to health care, that we have access to mental health care, that we have access to compassion and to love and support. And to me, that's what I hope that our district and this neighborhood can represent, and that we can do a lot better job of that here in the Tenderloin, which I think is an area that you know, is one of the most diverse neighborhoods. It's a place where a lot of people are able to find housing when they're pushed out of every other place. But it then should be a place where people are actually taken care of, and they don't have to live in fear of displacement. They don't have to have a situation where their own neighborhood is under attack constantly from corporate speculators and landlords who want to push out the people here and replace them. So that's a lot of, for me, why I'm running. I was born and raised in the Bay Area. My family's from San Francisco. I was raised by my mom. She worked in healthcare and children's healthcare. My sister's a public defender. I came from a family of people who really stood up and fought to make our communities better. And so that's what I was raised to do, and that's what I've done my entire career. I've been an attorney representing tenants, making sure that people in our community here are not evicted. I've fought Mosser, I've fought Green Tree, all of these folks who are coming in here, I think, who are really exploiting people, and we need to hold them accountable. I'm a school board member. I've been on the school board in San Francisco for 6 years. On my time on the school board, I've taken an approach that's really focused on the overall well-being of all of our students. I've stood up for our most vulnerable students. I passed the first policy in the country that actually created supports for students who have incarcerated parents, which is a huge part of our district. For homeless students, for undocumented students. The first thing I did was I changed our policies around school discipline, where 40% of our students were being suspended for willful defiance, and they were being kicked out of school, even though we know that suspensions and expulsions and all of those things actually do more harm than good. And so for me, we have these policies that are based on punishment, which actually do more harm. And so when you want to go out and hurt people who are already hurting, that's only going to make things worse. And so my perspective and what I've been trained and what I've been taught and what I've been raised to believe, my dad works in prisons. He works with people who are in solitary confinement. What I've been raised to believe is that compassion and love and support is the way, and that for people who are suffering, people who have been hurt, we need to actually be there for them, not push them around, push them out on the street, or hurt them, because I think that's always going to make things worse.
Yes, it is.
Before I came here, I was over at the Navigation Center on Division. I took a friend of mine over there who had been on the street for the last couple weeks, and every night that he was on the street, he got worse. He got deeper into really depression. He wasn't able to access his medication. And we know that for people who are living on the streets, if they have needs and those are not being met, whether that's medication or basic care, that it's going to get worse each night that they're out there. So I'm committed to making sure that we have an approach that's focused on human rights, and that's focused on compassion, and it's focused on harm reduction. I'm running against two people who are backed by billionaires and big developers. They've teamed up. One of them lived here for 6 months and they decided to run for supervisor. They've spent more in their independent expenditure in the last 2 weeks than I spent in the entire year. $300,000 they've spent in 2 weeks, funded by Republican billionaires, Ron Conley, and all these people that you've heard of. But the reality is that there's an agenda behind that, and neither of my candidates have been clear about being consistently for Prop C and Prop 10, which I'm 100% for. And if we pass,
Can you say a little bit about Prop C and Prop 10?
Yeah.
Just like
so,
in a nutshell.
Prop C, we can get 4,000 people into housing. That's a huge investment. We will overnight, we will double the amount of spending that we're putting into housing, into homelessness here. And it also has mental health, and it invests in the people who need to be in housing right now, and it would also provide new opportunities for housing for people who are currently in SROs or other types of housing situations to be able to move on out.
That's what we all hear.
So for folks who are in SROs now, my hope is that if people have been there for a long time, that they will have step-up opportunities.
How many people here live in a
funding.
studio or SRO?
I mean, SRO.
You want a better
Single resident
How many people would
occupancy.
like to move on?
I'm happy where I am.
One bedroom.
Yeah. So my commitment is to make sure that if we're providing entry-level housing to people who are on the street right now, that should free up opportunities for you all for additional housing, and that we're creating a pipeline of housing. So that's what we need to do. And also to make sure that it's supportive housing. Because when people are coming off the street, or just in general, you know, we all need to have somebody who's there for us, or people who are services on site to make sure they're accessible, health care, all of those things, case management. Then on Prop 10 would overturn Costa-Hawkins.
And what's Costa-Hawkins?
Costa-Hawkins is a law that was overturned a long time ago that prevents us from expanding rent control in any type of way, or expanding controls on rent when a unit becomes vacant. So the result of that is that only buildings that are built before 1979 are under rent control. So all of these new buildings, people can have 10%, 20%, 30% rent increases. There's no control at all on our ability to do that. The other thing that happens is when somebody leaves a unit, and this is what's happening in the Tenderloin right now, is they're buying these buildings, and then they're trying to get people out of the buildings so that when they get out of the buildings, they can charge as much as they possibly can. So somebody's paying.
That just happened to me, right? I was moved out of a place that I had been living as the head tenant for 10 years pushed into a smaller unit so that they could rent. My building's like 100 years old, but I was living in a one-bedroom flat. They're charging now for my one-bedroom flat $5,000. Wow. Believe me, I was not paying that, right? Wow. So we see this happen within people within our own organization.
Yeah. So we need to be able to strengthen those tenant protections, and there's other things that can happen. For example, if you're not on the lease, and then the person who is on the lease moves out, our ability to make sure that they don't spike up the rent right away is limited under Costa-Hawkins. So we would be able to overturn Costa-Hawkins and then expand the rent control in San Francisco if we pass Prop 10. And I'm for it, and my opponents have not been. So I think for me in general, as I said, our focus needs to be on the well-being of the residents here, their access to housing, their access to health care, and I think harm reduction is a huge part of that. And for cannabis, for medical cannabis, working with you all to make sure that we're ensuring there's access. I know that the prices have gone up, and access has been challenged since adult use came in. We need to be fighting to make sure that there's access there. And then in general, that we're taking a harm reduction approach, that we're getting people help. One of the biggest fears for me with my friend that I just talked about, who I took to the navigation center named Steven, is that he was on the street and he was using, and I wanted to make sure that I was going to get him into a place where they weren't just going to kick him out as soon as they found out that he was using. Because in the reality, we need to have navigation centers and other types of housing situations where you can get help, where you're not immediately told, well, you're using, so you can't be here and get out of here. Well, then what happens? Then people are put into even much more dangerous situations. And so I want to make sure that we don't have these 19th century rules that come out of these religious organizations, that govern all of our shelters and that govern all of our services. In reality, we need to meet people where they are, and they need to be able to be safe and comfortable and not criminalized when they come into a situation where they need housing or need help. So I think
he's sounding like he's a member of Access to Love, isn't he?
So I want to make sure that in our shelters and our navigation centers and all that we don't have these punitive policies that punish people for what are health conditions and what is something that we should be trying to get them help. And too often it's the opposite, that Instead, in those same places where people are trying to get help, it's actually, they're squeezing you. I'm just, the last thing I'm going to say, when I walked into this, and you all probably haven't seen this and all this, you know, I walked into this navigation center, and this is, you know, I think I support the navigation center model and all that, but but this is what's wrong with it. We go in there, and he takes the intake person takes a piece of paper out and just starts telling him all the reasons he can be kicked out. You can't do this. You have to be in here. If you do this, you get kicked out. If you do this, you get kicked out. Well, a lot of people are just going to say, well, then I'm not going to come in here because this is clearly not a place that cares about me. I'm trying to get to a better place,
and
but
you're telling me how
you got to meet me where I am right now. Otherwise, I would just rather be on the street. So I think that and this is St. Paul, that, you know, and again, this is kind of religious, old school religious. Not that there's good religious, right? I don't mean to say that it's bad religious, but like you got to meet people with a level of, hey, we're just glad you're here, and thank you for coming in here. We're going to look out for you while you're here. You know, we're going to make sure that you do better. We're going to take care of you, and like we hope you treat people here with respect. Why isn't that where you start?
Why isn't that where we're starting?
So that's where we should always start. And I will go to these shelters and I will go to these navigation centers and I will tell them that they need to change their policies to make sure that that's how we're approaching it.
Well, I'd rather hear that than, hey, I slept there for a night, aren't I cool?
Right.
You know, and not doing Jack Diddley and then going and congratulating all the religious leaders because our former supervisor, Jane Kim, really hurt us in many ways. And hurt our organization in particular, but they're you know, going and saying, hey, I've taken a look is not the same as, hey, I've changed the policies.
Right. Yeah.
And so I want to give a quick kind of jump in here about, you know, what Access of Love has been struggling with our, you know, each supervisor that has sat in the seat that you may sit in has promised for patients that they are going to make compassionate care permits, that they're going to put through legislation about compassionate care, that yes, they agree with me that all of these businesses who are millionaires upon our backs, upon the sick and dying of San Francisco, where this all started, right? That they're going to do veterans discounts and just simple things that I've worked on for 18 years. I have gotten nothing more than, well, if they choose to do that, and yeah, technically we agree with you, but, you know, and to quote Jane Kim in the last round of legislation, she felt that everybody in District 6 had access to cannabis. And it was one of the most ignorant statements I heard from her, because the reality is that most residents that have been in District 6 for a while do not have access to affordable cannabis. And now with the veto of compassion at the state level, the hope for our compassion program is only going to come through our city not only protecting safe injection sites, which is the big buzz, right, and which unfortunately Moonbeam put the quash on that too. So he basically went boom on harm reduction. So if our supervisors are going to go to bat for our safe injection sites, my God, why are they not going to bat for access to free quality cannabis, which is what we know helps addiction. Everybody here has had some type of battle with addiction and some type of battle with homelessness and being on the street, and we know that cannabis is part of the solution, but we're being told, you know, at each level, at the local and at the state level, that they need to prioritize the businesses. Like, for example, yesterday we were up at the health department trying to get the health department to refocus on harm reduction consumption sites, which our patient advocacy committee at the city level voted unanimously for the city installing 2 cannabis harm reduction sites with the city growth. That was in 2012. Had those harm reduction sites that we advised set up, how many people on the streets do you think would have come in? Wow, here we are, part of the solution, but we're being told you'll have nothing and you will like it, because you know, without that, what the governor vetoed was actually just a very incomplete bill about compassion. All it did was waive the corporate taxes on what the retail stores would give away. It didn't say that they needed to. It was a should, not you know, it wasn't a should or a must. It was if you so choose to. And they're not going to open their programs and be handed a tax bill, right? So now we have to ask the city to do something in being still a sanctuary city and protect programs like this. So, I mean, I want to throw that out there. And what I'm going to be trying to do after we have each of you come and speak to us is see who will sign on to be the supervisor that enters that as they come out the gate. You know, the harm reduction centers and protecting the compassion programs, you know, and I want to, you know, I'm sure you agree that compassion is a part of harm reduction, and even in Canada, they have needle exchange paired up with our community so that they're going out with CBDs as well. And we're here, we want to do that. There's not a person here who would not come with me and stand next to needle exchange and be like, here, have a joint instead, you know, have a joint with your clean.
No, absolutely. I'm you know, and I think that, you know, there's so much attention that's been given to the safe consumption sites around the safe injection, because that's kind of the main thing. Yes, we need that. But, you know, in reality, now that we know that we can't do that at the moment, right? How do we look at alternatives? And I think cannabis is a great tool that we have to combat the opioid epidemic, and that we're actually, you know, and that we're, as you said, that right now, I mean, and if it's the same price on the street for cannabis versus some of these other harder drugs that we know can be much more, you know, can be more damaging in some ways, well, then that provides an opportunity for the city to step in if people are willing to, you know, use cannabis, and if and have access to cannabis, then they're not going to use the harder drugs. So, you know, to the extent that that's a goal that the city has, there's a huge opportunity that cannabis provides. I think that we have to be more intentional about it. The health department has to be involved. We have to open these harm reduction centers, and then we have to hold the retailers accountable to have access, you know, to access for patients. And maybe some of the supervisors, they flipped on this because they're now getting a lot of donations from the companies.
They're not even quiet about it to me when I walk in to talk to them. They're like, do you know how many lobbyists are walking around here with envelopes? And I'm like, do you know how incredibly ridiculous that would be for me as a compassion activist to walk around throwing envelopes at people? That doesn't happen, you know. All I can walk in with is my heart on my sleeve saying, if the governor cut off compassion, I'm going to be doing it, and I'm going to be doing it against the law, and I need the city to basically come out and say, we are going to remain a sanctuary status city for medical cannabis, and we will not aid the state in any way, shape, or form for investigating, prosecuting, or arresting any of our compassion facilitators, because now that's what's going to happen to us. Not the guy selling heroin and methamphetamine on the corner right here. He is not as much of a risk as the compassion programs will be. Now that's crazy.
Right. And you know, we to the extent that the city is worried about some of the opioid challenges, well, we do have to think about supply and demand. And there is a lot of demand, you know, for a variety of reasons in our community. A lot of it is that, you know, there's a lot of unmet medical needs, there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of reasons, you know, why people may want to go access opioids. But the supply and demand, we have the opportunity with cannabis there to affect the demand by providing an alternative, a legal alternative. And so, you know, I think that's a huge opportunity for the city and for this district. You know, it's really the front lines of that. And I think it's naive to think that we're going to address the issue of the opioid challenge in our city by just policing. That you're just going to have some police officers walking around, and all of a sudden, the drug dealers are going to go away, or something like that.
It hasn't happened yet.
There's so much demand, but you know, for some people, if they had something to access that was free or much cheaper, maybe they wouldn't go out to Golden Gate and Hyde and buy over there. So I think it's really smart for us to think about it that way. And even if they are buying over there, that we are taking a harm reduction approach to them and their needs, and not a criminalization approach.
I'd like to open up the floor for a few questions. And be sure when you introduce yourself, tell a little bit about your activism history to Matt, so he knows a little bit more about who you are and why why you're in Access to Love. So I'm going to start with Denise, and I'm going to go to Lucy, and then I'll go over to Georgia, and then I'll go over to Georgie, and then I'll go over here and here. Okay, let's start over here. Denise?
Well, Matt, you answered a lot of my questions already when you came to my house, and now you answered more of them. And so, I just, I know you don't have a lot of creepy donors, because the other ones do. So, I don't know. I mean, you answered my questions. You don't have a lot of creepy donors, and that's what creeped me out, really, the donors.
And on that note, I published on my personal Facebook page, which, as my friends, you're more than welcome to jump on. I published the article today from a group called Fog City Journal. So that's the group that the sort of City Hall insiders, they read that. I suggest we read it too. And they just published a very in-depth article about who's behind candidates. It's thick, it's long, it took me a while to read. It was really thick and long, but it was good. Please read it.